Good evening and welcome to this, the latest View from the Bridge on behalf of the Royal Navy and Royal Marines Charity. I'm Stephen Watson. I'm a Vice President of the charity. And tonight in the CTN studio, I have a very special guest in the newish Fleet Commander, Vice Admiral Andy Burns. Let me just explain how the format tonight is going to work. I think this is the fourth in the series. So if you've been with us before, you'll know how this works. I'm going to have a conversation with the Admiral for half an hour or so about his role, how he sees the world, what the Royal Navy is up to. But then, importantly, there's an opportunity for this to broaden into a wider conversation. And the way that we're going to do that, you all know how Zoom calls and webinars work by now. There is a Q&A box on the screen. So rather than trying to plug you through on video, if I can ask you to put your question into the system, and then I've got a laptop here, and I will faithfully put the questions exactly as they come to me, to the Admiral, and then we can broaden the conversation. We're doing this for the RNRMC, and we're doing that for a good reason. The charity, and I've been involved now for almost 10 years, is a hugely effective and important cause. And as we'll hear later on in the discussion, the RNRMC really has a strategic link to the serving community and the serving Navy. And so everybody on this call tonight, I know many of you are, if you like, friends and family of the charity, and also of the Nelson's Company, which is the closest way of becoming a member of the charity, and I would urge you to do that. But I never tire of banging the charity drum. So you've heard it here, and we'll pick up on some of the detail a bit later on. So the format, Andy, Admiral, I am thrilled that you're here. Thank you very much for making the time.
Good to be here.
This is a particularly busy time, and I'd like to hear your take on just the external environment and the geopolitical landscape, if you like. But you are relatively new in post. I think you took over in September.
That's right.
From Jerry Kidd.
Yeah.
Many people watching this evening will know Jerry and have had a beer with Jerry every now and then. So how's it going?
Well, I think the first thing to say is I'm really enjoying it. And I think that's important to not just say I'm enjoying it, but to visibly be seen to be enjoying it. And I certainly am. And I think that's for a number of reasons. The first reason is that we're enjoying an extraordinary amount of political support. We have a government who I think really understands the value of having a credible navy. It understands that as an island nation, we survive on seaborne trade to a significant degree for our prosperity. And these themes and messages have really resonated, and I think that's partly why we got such a good result in the last integrated review. The other reason I'm enjoying it so much is because of our people. And I've had the great privilege in the first few months of my tenure as the Fleet Commander to visit all our fighting arms, both at home and deployed, both at sea and ashore. And I continue to be hugely impressed by the quality, but also the resilience and fortitude of our people who are doing remarkable things. And I think if you look at the sort of operational tapestry that we are delivering on behalf of the nation right now, it's not only hugely impressive, but it's very exciting as well. So putting aside the return of the very successful Carrier Strike Group deployment Operation Fortis at the end of last year, we've got our Batch 2 offshore patrol vessels deployed all over the world, including in the Indo-Pacific. We've got Royal Marines embarked in our forward deployed ships, but also conducting training tasks all over the world. We've got our next carrier on task, the Prince of Wales, providing the afloat command platform for the NATO High Readiness Force Maritime, and it's ready to embark our 2-star strike staff as well. And it's important to recognise command and control as a capability. And we are continuing to deliver operational advantage in the North Atlantic. There is a persistent threat and challenge from Russia, but we are tackling that challenge with our partners and allies every day. And of course, at the pinnacle of our operational output is the continuous at-sea deterrent, and we are the guardians of the ultimate guarantor of our security. So it's a really exciting time. And I think also there are some things which we've delivered in the last few months. So the fourth generation responsibility has transferred to me from the second Sea Lord. So it's a bigger job, and it's a very different job.
About the composition of the team, because, you know, as you come into post and you take up the sort of baton of fleet commander, I mean, in some respects, many things remain the same. There's continuity.
Yeah.
But at the top of the shop, we have a new First Sea Lord in Sir Ben Key, new Second Sea Lord recently. So the whole of that top team has changed. And I mean, is your job just to keep things going and you know, it's a program of continuity, or do the three of you have a different agenda? I mean, is there on your watch going to be a different focus or a resetting of priorities?
I think inevitably there'll be a different approach, because it's like any change of command. There are different personalities now at the helm of the Navy, and the three of us will certainly work together, I think, very effectively. But I think it's also important to pay tribute to our predecessors as well, who have laid the foundation for the exciting programme that the Navy has in front of us, with that political support which I described earlier. So I think there is a sense that we want to continue the momentum. We want to continue to modernise. And for me, I really believe that we need to be adaptive. So we need to accept and recognise the geopolitical trends that are all around us, whether that's the threat from Russia or China and the impact they have on our vital national interests all over the world, or whether it's the pace of technological change. We need to respond to that, and I think we are doing with the operational output that I've described. But also, we need to recognise things when they change, and the Navy will have to adapt quite quickly. And that has not necessarily been our habit, but we certainly intend to be an adaptive Navy.
What might that look like? Now, I mean, I know recently the new First Sea Lord, 12 weeks into the role, he took you all for an off-site to really sort of figure out, you know, where as a leadership team you now take this. So, I mean, given that external environment and given the political direction, and if you like, the investment of treasure that's being made in new ships and submarines and so forth, which we'll go on to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your, if you like, 100-day priorities? You know, as you come out of the gates at the beginning of February, what's it going to look like?
Well, first of all, our reputation continues to be founded in our operational output. So we've got to continue to deliver on operations. We've got to continue to deliver the continuous at-sea deterrent, because we are the guardians of it at the pinnacle of that operational output. But we are also charged with delivering the very positive integrated review outcome. So that includes investment in our weapon systems to make us more lethal, Sea Viper evolution, the recovery of our stockpiles. It includes a very exciting shipbuilding pipeline to include a multi-role offshore surveillance ship to look after our undersea cables on which our economic systems depend. It includes delivering Type 26, Type 31 upgrades to our current ships and submarines. The three new Astute-class submarines, the remaining Astute-class submarines, will come into service, and each one of those is better than the last one, so that's really exciting. But we also need to modernise the workforce as well. There's no doubt that we need to reflect the society we're drawn from and the society we serve more effectively. Now, of course, it's great news that we now have a woman in our 2-star Admiral's cohort. We will have 4 of our major training establishments being led by women. That is progress, but there is more to be done, and we're determined to do that. I think also there's something about ethical leadership, which the three of us believe passionately about, and that is making sure that our values are represented by our leaders, and where that's not the case, we call it out and we do something about it. We won't stand by on our watch.
Okay. Let's start with the operations. I mean, back in December, the weather was miserable, but you welcomed back the carrier strike group. And that was an unusual experience, I think, in HM Naval Base Portsmouth, because you're used to welcoming back ships on a single deployment. But, you know, if a whole fleet turns up on one day, that's logistically quite challenging.
Well, and we brought it forward by 24 hours as well, so there was an additional test.
Oh dear, right. Yeah. But just, you know, from your perspective, What really did that represent? This was a 9-month endeavour. I mean, presumably a huge undertaking, and the Navy made it look effortless. And I remember, Steve Morehouse sitting in this studio on the eve of departure, and just, asking us all to be a little bit careful, so we're not over-promising and under-delivering, and just reminding everybody of just how big a deal CSG 21 was. But as you sit here now, with basically many objectives met and milestones met, what does that say about the Navy that you now run, and what's the message to allies and partners around the world about really the level of ambition at the heart of our maritime agenda?
Well, of course, the preparation for that deployment went way back, not just right up to the 9-month start of the deployment, but a huge amount of preparation went into that. And of course, that preparation was synchronised with the other frontline commands, so we need to recognise that. And again, it was really about the people, the thousands of people who were embarked at sea in that task group, who delivered an extraordinary level of output with some quite trying circumstances. I mean, let's remember there was some, the COVID pandemic restrictions, played out fully across the whole of that deployment. But I think it also spoke to our level of ambition as a service, but also the level of ambition of our country as well, and particularly within that sort of global Britain agenda. There were plenty of doubters who said we couldn't do this, and we proved we could do it. And I think if you'd shown us the level of output that we were going to achieve at the start of that deployment, we might have said that was wildly ambitious. But if you just look at some of the statistics, the fact we conducted operational activity with 33 countries, we visited 40 countries, we flew almost 5,000 flying hours from many different types of aircraft, and we demonstrated real interchangeability with our closest allies, the Americans in particular. I think that represents a huge level, not just of achievement, but of ambition.
So, I mean, you've also raised a very high level of expectation, and an expectation that you're going to be able, reasonably effortlessly to do it again.
Yes.
But what is the reality? I mean, was this a once in a generation effort from the Royal Navy and our allies, or can we expect CSG style deployments, around the world on a regular basis now?
Well, we can expect that sort of deployment every couple of years, and there'll be other activity between those times. But this is part of our forward presence agenda and posture, and that's why we've left 2 APVs in the Indo-Asia-Pacific, because what we found is that a carrier strike group has a convening power and authority, and the white ensign is still a very powerful emblem of both Royal Navy and, I think, national ambition.
I mean, there are some at home that would question why the Indo-Pacific is important. And when you're looking at the domestic agenda, I mean, why is it that we are investing resource and treasure to go to the other side of the world? I mean, does it deliver trade deals? What is really the purpose of this? Or is it just, chest beating to make ourselves feel happier?
Well, I think we should recognise that the global economic centre of gravity is moving steadily eastward. We are an economy which is fully integrated in that global economy, and therefore the Navy has a role to protect and defend our national strategic endeavours and economic linkages where they might be challenged. So that involves upholding our values, upholding the rules-based international system with like-minded partners. And what we have found is that when we deploy a carrier strike group in the way that we did, although we have a clear plan to start with, others wish to play a part. And that's how you end up with having 3 carrier strike groups and an additional carrier, 4 carriers in all, operating simultaneously in the South China Sea. And that sends a very powerful message of allied unity to uphold the system upon which our prosperity depends.
I was sent a photograph by the CEO of HMS Defender, one of the escorts, which was a photograph from the bridge wing or out through the bridge windows, looking at 4 carriers in front of the Type 45, and just reflecting to him that, that is a once in a career, or probably a career first, hopefully to be repeated. Event. I mean, that's a huge demonstration of real maritime power. But I mean, in terms of and that was brought about through working with the Japanese and with the Dutch Navy and the Americans. What is the lasting legacy or the lessons learned from CSG about that partnership with allies and that sort of close working relationship?
Well, I mean, first of all, to your point about supporting business agreements or diplomacy, we have a role to do that as well. And I think the Fortis deployment was very effective in doing that. I think there's a sort of operational requirement to be genuinely interchangeable with our allies, not just interoperable. That gives you a really credible fighting force with our partners and allies upon whom we might depend in time of crisis and conflict. But I also think the Royal Navy has an instinctive ability to disaggregate and aggregate a task group. So look at us sending Astute to Fremantle in Australia to support the AUKUS agreement not long after it was announced. But our ability to send elements of the task group across a very wide geographical area means we can have widespread effect, either to support diplomatic efforts or economic agreements, or to operate with partners and allies and deepen our relationships with them. And then we have the ability to come back as a really potent symbol of a fighting outfit.
Now, you mentioned the support and direction from our political masters and in a sense, the mandate that's enshrined in the integrated review. But the Defence Secretary has also made it very clear, to you and CDS, get RN ships and submarines working and get them back to sea. Now, there are press reports today that all the Type 45s are alongside in Portsmouth. Is that what the Defence Secretary means by get the ships working and back to sea?
Well, I think the Defence Secretary would recognise how many of our ships are at sea and working. And again, if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be in a position to describe that fantastic array of operational output which we are delivering day in, day out on behalf of the nation. But I think what he is getting at is we need to get greater availability from our platforms. And we are making every effort to do that. And we're looking at an increase of between 10 and 20%, depending on the platform, whether it's a ship or a submarine. And to your direct point about the Type 45s, only one of those got alongside today because they've been in operations, and we are readying another Type 45 to go to sea very quickly. So that won't be the case for very long. They have a meaningful program.
I'm a big Type 45 fan.
I know you are.
But it's a Daily Mail question.
Absolutely. But I think it's important. It's an important question to put to me as the fleet commander to say how much they are doing. Now we know we've got to deliver the propulsion improvement program for Type 45. We have the first of those in Camel Laird. The others will roll through in time, but alongside that and in parallel, they will continue to deliver on operations. So we have some programs in place, Renown and Resolution, for surface ships and submarines, which will deliver that increase in availability. Now, some of that...
But are you basically saying this is old news? 5 years ago, maybe this would be a legitimate criticism that, frankly, we have these assets, half of them aren't working, they're not looked after properly, we're not getting ships and assets out of the door. But actually, given the improvements, given the quality of the new equipment coming through, and just the way that, your teams have really lent in to delivery and getting, ships and submarines off the wall, that there's a material difference in the output now?
Well, we're already seeing signs of improvement from projects Renown and Resolution, but this will take years really to come to fruition. But the fact we are seeing shifts in behaviour, and this is it's not just about investment, it's also about behaviour. It's about making what's been described as the enterprise approach a genuine enterprise, and that means collaboration with our industrial partners and our delivery agents, as well as improving our behaviours with NCHQ so we can set a very clear demand signal. It's about simplifying the interfaces as well. So we've set up a class cell in Portsmouth Dockyard to look after our Batch 2 OPVs. And that brings together all the agencies involved. So the decision-making loop is shorter. We've got the right people talking to each other, delivering better availability for Batch 2s. And that is the model that we will then roll out for our other classes of ship and learn the lessons. And we will have learnt those lessons by the end of March.
Now, I'm going to go on to ask the Admiral various questions about the threats we face and operationally how that's working. But I'm very keen to put your questions. So I think now is the moment. If you have a question, can you go to the Q&A box on your screen, submit the question, and they'll start coming through on the screen here, and I'll do my best to feed those in. The Prime Minister, and I think this was in the integrated review, said the Royal Navy needs to be the foremost navy in Europe. Can you explain what that means? Does that mean it's the biggest navy in Europe, or how do you measure good and best?
Well, I think we are the foremost naval power in Europe, but that doesn't mean just having 2 carriers and operating deterrent submarines and having extraordinary people, although it is all those things. I think it's a couple of other things as well. I think it's about thought leadership. How do we maintain our position as the leaders in thinking about maritime operations and what it means to build and maintain a navy? What does it mean to be genuinely innovative, experimental, embracing technology at the pace of relevance? And what does it mean to be an authoritative navy? So a navy that other nations look up to. And we found that during the Fortis deployment. We are still, in many navies' eyes, the mother navy, the standard against which other navies gauge themselves. And I think we need to maintain that position. I think that is what the Prime Minister meant. And that is the ambition that I share with the First Sea Lord and the Second Sea Lord.
Can we just turn to the realities of where we find ourselves? I guess, this week and for some weeks to come, we're all sitting here looking east to the Black Sea, to Ukraine. No one's exactly sure how that's going to play out. What do you see as, the Navy's contribution to that? Are we ready to sail ships into the Black Sea? Is that how this might work?
So I think we need to, from a maritime point of view, as a colleague of mine would say, get a bigger map. So this is not just solely about Ukraine and Eastern Europe. This crisis will play out in a number of areas, including in the maritime. And we know we have a constant competition from Russia in the North Atlantic, which is really our centre of gravity. And that's not just about anti-submarine warfare, it's about the freedom of navigation and manoeuvre of a carrier strike group. It's about the deterrent and protecting the deterrent, but it's also about critical underwater infrastructure upon which our economic systems depend. And that is playing out right now around our sensitive waters. And it's been in the public domain that we've had Russian surface action groups passing through the channel, either on their way to the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, or operating off the southwest peninsula and off the coast of Ireland. And we have responded very effectively to that requirement. And we are now generating additional force elements to respond to what might be an enduring challenge. But let's see how that plays out.
Let me turn to some of the questions that are coming in. So Robin Knox-Johnson, one of our honorary officers, is reflecting that we can have the best anti-submarine warships around, but then we have to get those ships supplied into UK ports, which means we have to make them safe in their approaches. How does that work?
Well, I wonder what he means by safe in their approach. He means the UK ports being safe to navigate in and out, so. I assume. Well, I think we have a great many ports that we can navigate safely in and out of. My own experience in command would suggest that is true. It's not just the dockyard ports. So I think we have a degree of choice and flexibility there.
I mean, he also goes on to ask about the threat from mines, which, I mean, I think most of us think of mines as, something from sort of Second World War or maybe the Cold War, but there is still this threat. Do we have enough of the new drones, to protect our ports and sea lanes, given the decision to sort of retire, the traditional capabilities we have in this area?
Yes, we will have. I mean, now we have a mixture of crewed systems represented by our hunt and sandown minesweepers and hunters, but also we're introducing autonomous systems as well, already deployed to the Gulf, operating off the Clyde to keep the approaches to and from the Clyde open, and that is an investment that we gain from the very positive result in the integrated review, and we will expand that capability. And it's really that mix of crewed and uncrewed systems which I think will deliver the capacity that I think Robin's getting after in his question.
There's a wider point here, about sunset capabilities, and I think the modus operandi in the past has been, we hold on to these things for as long as we can, and there's if you like, almost a sort of an emotional attachment to it. But we need to be a lot bolder, don't we? I mean, we are in a technological arms race, the like of which, we haven't really seen in our careers before. So, we can't get sentimental about some of these things, can we? I mean, we do need to sort of cut and move on.
Well, I agree with that. And so we need to continue to deliver on operations and develop at the same time. And there will often be a tension, but we cannot hang on to systems or platforms that no longer have a role in modern warfare or are obsolescent. And that's going to require us to take some pretty bold decisions about disinvesting in some capabilities in order to invest in those technologies which will give us battle-winning advantage and operational advantage. And we need to maintain that where we already have advantage, the underwater battle space, I think, being a really good example. But we do need to be bold, and we won't hesitate through our balance of investment process to make those decisions.
We were talking about the importance of allies earlier on, and Gisela Stewart is asking about cooperation with European allies. I mean, she recalls attending a Thursday War a little while ago, being told about the close cooperation with the German Navy, which I guess is replicated, with the Dutch and the French. I mean, in sort of post-Brexit Britain, and as we strive for the Indo-Pacific and whatever, are some of these traditional relationships and partnerships changing, or is that still a priority?
It is absolutely a priority, and our commitment to NATO is one of the lenses through which we look at our long-term scheduling, and that is throwing up opportunities. I think the fact that the Prince of Wales is the afloat command platform for the NATO High Readiness Force Maritime, and our carrier strike group headquarters is committed to that, and a two-star commander is committed to that, is an indication of the seriousness with which we commit to NATO. But I think there are other alliances, such as the Joint Expeditionary Force, which is the Nordics and the Baltic states, and we are the framework nation for that. And I have regular conversations, not just with NATO partners, but also with our JEF Maritime partners as well. So I think we're deepening those relationships. We need to continue to invest in them. But as far as I can tell from my first few months in post, they are extremely strong.
That's good to hear. Lots of questions coming in, so please keep typing, and I'll try and work through them. Question from Pete Sandeman. Are you confident that there is a depth of spares, ammunition and stores to support the Royal Navy if we end up in, anything lasting, a few more days, potentially in the Black Sea or whatever? And again, mindful, we were talking about Type 45s. I mean, I think, they deploy with sort of 48, Sea Vipers in 48 silos. But I mean, you could you could fire off 48 of those on a busy afternoon. How do we actually replenish these ships, and and have you got the supply chain? Are the stores there?
So I'm certainly confident of us sustaining operations in the timescale you described, Stephen.
Right.
But I think the question is getting after something more enduring than that. And we tested that during Fortis in having those supplies and stores, including ammunition, vested in the task group. I think we have pretty robust global supply chains which would resupply in time of crisis. But I think, as I alluded to at the start, we do need to do better. So through the IR, we had investment in recovering our Sea Viper stockpiles. We know we've got to do better with spares, and that is why Renown and Resolution have been launched. That is part of those programs to improve our resilience in terms of support and spares. So it's not perfect. It's a lot better than it has been for a long time, and it will improve.
Slightly different tangent from Christopher Samuel. Thank you for putting this question. At 55, sailors retire from the Royal Navy. I think you joined in 89. I'm not doing the maths. But at 55, retire. In other professions, and certainly in my day job, that's an age when people really, you leverage their experience, that they're able to give back. Certainly until 65, maybe 70. Are we really missing a trick here?
Well, I really do think we are, actually. I mean, I think it's a tragedy when we see some very experienced and competent people leave at whatever level, actually. I think there is probably a role for reserve service. So I think a bit of clarity over what we want from our reserves would be helpful, and we're certainly intending to review that because I think they have many specialist skills. But I think there ought to be opportunities for people towards the end of their careers to choose to move into some form of reserve service or come under civil service rules. And I think we are certainly looking at extending those opportunities for people who are coming to the end of their careers. There are the obvious opportunities in the defence industry. But of course, you still want to achieve a lot at the age of 55. But, those are the rules at the moment. But we're looking at ways to continue to maintain that experience that would otherwise be lost.
I mean, the reserves have had, perhaps not the easiest couple of years, I think it's fair to say. But, presumably, that's a big untapped resource. And I remember, a couple of months back, I was down in Dartmouth for a reserves passing out parade. And I met a newly qualified midshipman, young man. I won't embarrass him by naming him, but I asked him what he did in his day job, and he said, "Well, I'm a rocket scientist working for NASA on the manned mission to Mars." And I thought he was pulling my leg, but he's not. Now, surely somebody like that with those skills, he turns up at a drill night on a Tuesday, but shouldn't we be eking that expertise out and sort of fast tracking it to, the Innovation Centre or Dan Cheeseman's world as CTO?
Yeah. So I think we need to define exactly what it is we want from our reserves, and it's not just about delivering more mass to our workforce. It really is tapping into some of those unique skills. And as a formation commander, as a task group commander, I have benefited personally from some of those skills, whether it's cyber skills or digital skills or media skills. Those are the sort of things that we don't necessarily have in-house, which are represented by our reserves. And you can probably think of many other qualifications and skills that they would bring to us. So I think it is something that we need to develop. And in fact, we were only discussing our reserves last week, and that again is part of the agenda that First Sea Order, Second Sea Order and I have.
Well, if you're a reservist watching this evening, that's good news. Let's hold.
Well, it's a ringing endorsement for what our reserves deliver.
Yeah. Question from Keith Knowles. At a time when there's so many vacancies in the economy, what are you doing to attract, retain, reward, and indeed value our people? Now, I think recruitment's traditionally, actually on a historical basis, at very high levels at the moment. But can that continue?
Well, I think it can, as long as our offer remains as attractive as it is, but we also need to retain those people as well. And what most of our people crave is stability. And we have conducted a review of our workforce, and we're looking at different crewing models to make sure that we do provide greater stability than perhaps we have in the past. So our dual watch or 3-watch rotational crewing system is very popular. It gives a bit of certainty. Our families like that, and not surprisingly, most of those who are within those crews are volunteers. Montrose has been our pathfinder, now dual crewed in the Gulf for a couple of years. Most of our all of our HM ships are dual crewed, and our batch 2 APVs deployed overseas are also in a watch system. So those systems are working well, are popular, they provide stability. I think we need to continue to value and invest in our people. So I think we need to not just champion the quality of our people and what they are delivering, but genuinely look after them. I think we've made some policy changes, such as allowing ships to be dormant alongside, being looked after by other units. I saw that for myself over the Christmas period. That is also working well. But I think we need to look at all ways we can continue to reward our people, and I think we need to improve the conditions within which they operate as well, particularly in some of our establishments, and that's certainly something that I will fight for. So I think there are a number of things we must continue to do to champion our people.
Bill Oliphant, who's the chief executive at the RNA,
yeah,
again, is reflecting that you have, as fleet commander, more of a sort of personnel aspect, baked into the job.
Yeah.
I mean, he's saying that, when we started our careers, our leadership used to talk about the greatest single factor being the sailor. He doesn't hear that expression much in the modern rhetoric these days. Does it still hold true?
It does absolutely hold true. Whatever phraseology you describe, I mean, I think that particular phrase became a bit overused, but it's still true. I absolutely recognise Bill's point. You cannot be the foremost naval power in Europe without the quality people that we have delivering every day. And I said at the start, I continue to be humbled and impressed by the quality of our people. And that is what we have to maintain. So we do have to value them. We do have to invest in them, whether that's physical resilience or mental resilience, or providing stability in our ships' programs for both them and their families. These are the things that the three of us are putting right at the forefront of our agenda. So our people, the personnel we have in the Royal Navy today are absolutely the greatest single factor. You can have all the technology that you might wish for, but without the people to operate that technology, without people to actually deliver that thought leadership, which is part of being the foremost naval power in Europe, you won't reach that ambition.
Now, I mean, just before we went on air, we were talking about some of the new ships, and I think you're very keen to get up to Rosyth and also the Clyde CHMS Glasgow. Robert Streeter is asking really about MOD procurement. And, are we seeing an improved service and capability from procurement, reducing delays, getting a hold of spend? But again, there's also a message there for industry, presumably, that as the nation invests treasure in these new capabilities, we've got to make it work, and being on time and on budget and to the quality that we need is the absolute minimum.
Yes. So there is a procurement improvement programme being run by the Ministry of Defence. I think our part in that is to be very clear about what we're asking for through our delivery agents and of industry. But I think also it's important to be a bit more open and collaborative with industry as well, because I think they will be part of our solution to some of the threats and challenges that are posed. And actually, I am seeing a trend towards much more agile procurement. In my last role, we delivered software upgrades, some specific capabilities very, very rapidly, simply through challenging some of the perceived impediments and actually knocking them down one by one, and then seeing actually an idea in the headquarters coming to fruition and delivering capability to the front line really quite rapidly. There's definitely more to be done. I think it's more about behaviours, the enterprise approach, being collaborative, being clear about what we want for the future, but also being adaptive. So if things change around us, we need to recognise those challenges for what they are and not blindly follow a particular course of action. So if we think we've got it wrong, we should say so and go for something else and move on.
Now, I imagine, I mean, certainly astute, but Type 26, Type 31, I mean, these are reasonably mature programs. But as you start to turn your mind to what comes after that, so Type 83 replacing the 45s and so forth, how can you set up the whole system for success now? I mean, and what responsibility sits on NCHQ and your teams in I mean, I suppose almost just getting the terms of reference right about what we see these new capabilities needing to be and deliver?
Well, first of all is to be threat driven and understand the threat as it is turning out, not as we would wish it to be, and meeting that challenge head on and developing those platforms and the systems within them in accordance with the operational analysis that's based on that threat assessment. So it's really important to be threat driven, but problem led as well. So what is the operational problem we are seeking to solve? I think in the past we've had quite a sort of linear progression where we've started with a sort of project or program, and we've wanted to see that through to its sort of ultimate end state, without recognising that perhaps things have changed and we need to diverge from that particular project or program. So I think there is a sort of mentality that we wish to see in Navy Command headquarters. But there's no doubt that the design of some of these platforms, being much more modular and therefore adaptive, will play to that mentality. So the Type 26 will have mission bays in which you can put autonomous systems. The Mark 41 launcher in both Type 26 and Type 31 will mean you can have a variety of missions. You can perhaps be more interchangeable with your allies. You can insert smart munitions, and you can develop that over time. We found with our Astute class submarines, each one has been a step change from the last one. They continue to improve. The Dreadnought submarine will be the most sophisticated submarine ever built in this country. And actually our role is actually to set the foundations and the conditions for those transitions. So our current frigate fleet to Type 26 and Type 31, Vanguard to Dreadnought, will be a challenging transition. We have to deliver CAS-D, the at-sea deterrent, every day, whilst making sure we meet first-in-class Dreadnought in the early 2030s.
And I guess herein it is the challenge, the necessary challenge to industry, that we're currently running Vanguards way past their envisaged operational out-of-service dates and so forth. Huge pressure on your teams and the ship's companies and the crews driving them. But any delay on Dreadnought, puts the continuous deterrent at greater jeopardy and risk. So there's a huge amount at stake that we get these things right and we keep them on track.
Well, it's a national strategic programme.
Okay.
It doesn't get much bigger than that.
Right. But if there's anyone from industry watching,
well, I think industry understands the challenge, but we need to work with them and not against them. Yep. So I think it's partly about behaviours, it's partly about investment, but it's really about us all working together to make sure that those transitions are as effective and seamless and frictionless as possible.
So one of the technologies is cyber, and actually an interesting question from Simon Pillar, who says, the threat of cyber warfare is something that obviously the RN is stepping up to respond to. But are we actually over-investing in it? I mean, is this really for the Navy to do, or shouldn't that be a broader joint forces effort?
Well, Joint Forces Command have the lead for cyber in defence, but we have to take some responsibility ourselves. Firstly, to understand what our cyber picture, the recognised cyber picture is, and therefore our vulnerabilities, so that we shore those up. But it's also about making sure we have some offensive capabilities at our disposal as well, perhaps. So it's making sure that our platforms can be lethal, but also support defence engagement and deliver a variety of effects in what you might call hybrid or grey zone tactics. And that again requires a mentality shift so that we can operate in the hybrid zone, because that's what our adversaries are doing to us. And I think that includes cyber capability. So I wouldn't say we are over-investing in it, but we recognise the opportunity, but we also recognise the challenge in making sure we are resilient against the cyber threat that our adversaries are fielding against us.
Now, in the maritime domain, and I think, most people watching, and certainly we would, be very much of the view that this is a maritime era of operations that we're entering into. Our adversaries are investing heavily. A resurgent Russia, China with a navy that increases by the size of the Royal Navy in every 12, 18 months. Are we a bit part player in this? How do we respond to the scale and the capabilities that they're investing in, from hypersonic, weapons to, latest generations of submarines and so forth? What's the UK Royal Navy answer to that emerging threat and landscape?
So part of this is about our mentality shift. And it's about being as collaborative as possible with partners and allies. And by that I mean partners and agencies across government in the UK, first of all, but also really working closely together with our allies, wherever that is in the world, whether that's in the North Atlantic or in the Indo-Asia-Pacific. And that's why interchangeability is so important. It can't just be interoperability, where we all pitch up for an exercise and pat each other on the back because it's gone well. We have to make sure we can actually operate and fight together. And that means being interchangeable. And that's another thing that Fortis really demonstrated, was the ability to work really closely with the Americans in particular, but also those other nations which fielded elements into that task group. And we're definitely not a bit part player. Specifically in the North Atlantic, we have an alliance arrangement and agreement which is dealing with a persistent Russia challenge across all those four strands that I indicated earlier, whether that's anti-submarine warfare, our freedom to manoeuvre across the sea lines of communication which would resupply Europe in time of crisis, or it's protecting our critical national infrastructure, the undersea cables upon which our economy depends, and it's protecting the at-sea deterrent. We've been successful in doing that, in that latter case, every single day for nearly 55 years.
Well, that's an impressive, potentially daunting list of things that we need to tackle. And then into the mix, we're being asked to patrol the English Channel on Migrant Watch. Is that a complete distraction, an unwelcome one, or is that some tasking that you think, that the Navy's up for that?
Well, we are certainly up for playing a part in securing our maritime borders. What we have delivered so far to that demand from the government is to provide some planning expertise and also to provide some command and control understanding. But actually, what we need to look at is the whole business model of cross-channel migration, because we don't just need to treat the symptom, we need to attack the financial flows, the criminal gangs, which result in the scale of migration that we're seeing. I think the Navy has a role to play in that, but actually we've still got some way to go before we settle on precisely what that role might be.
Okay. We've got about 10 minutes left, just under. So we're gonna finish on time because the Admiral needs to get back to Portsmouth, and you've probably got dinner and other things to get on with. But there's still time to put in a few more questions. I've got one from Chris New, who's from the family sport charity Aggies, who do great work. And he said, look, in order to maintain the operational effectiveness of our people at sea, we need to maintain the morale of their colleagues and families back home. What more would you like to see the charity sector, and obviously this includes the RMC as well, in helping you achieve that end and keeping up the operational effectiveness of the fleet?
Well, I'm very clear that the moral component of operational capability is a vital component of what we deliver. And all I ask of the charities, both Aggies and the RNRMC is continue to do what you're doing. So whether that is supporting our people who are deployed, supporting their families who are also a part of that moral component, whether it's helping us transition into civilian life or it's supporting veterans, I just ask that you continue to do what you're doing, because I, for one, don't take that for granted, and it is a vital part of all our endeavours.
And the RNRMC in particular, I mean, not at the exclusion of any of the other charities, it's a family of charities, but you know, what else can they do? And for the serving community, you know, deployed at sea, what value does the support of the Navy charity like that provide?
Well, I don't want to sit here and ask you to do more, ask the RNRMC to do more. I just want you to continue to do what I think you do really effectively already, and that is to be a charitable organisation which focuses on the whole life cycle of someone who's part of the naval family, whether that's serving today or transitioning into another role, or it's the family network that supports us as well. So that's really all I ask. Just continue to do what I think you do fantastically well already. Just please continue to do that.
Okay, noted. We'll act on that. In the many list of responsibilities that you have one which is called the gender advocate.
Yeah.
Which I dare say a generation ago people would have thought, what on earth is that about? But you've just promoted the first female admiral in Jude Terry. How do you take that responsibility as gender advocate? What does that actually mean, and what are the goals now?
So it is absolutely about advocacy. So I, for one, firmly believe that more diverse teams are more effective and make better decisions, and we are not as diverse as we need to be. So certainly the representation of women in our service is lower than we would wish it to be, and therefore I think it's right that there is a senior advocate to champion their cause and to lay the conditions to increase the percentage of women we have serving in the Royal Navy. And we now have an allies network throughout the service which takes soundings on my behalf. And that's important because it's also about the environment we create. So are we creating an environment where every individual can come to work in whatever setting and give of their best? That is the culture and environment we need to set up in order for all our people to thrive. And I'm particularly interested in creating the right conditions for our women to thrive and progress through the organisation and continue to serve. And that's really where my role fits in.
Just finish, where we began with people and the importance of people. I mean, I've been very impressed. I had the chance to join HMS Defender, on her way back, for, the deployment, CSG deployment, and just spending time with young officers and the HODs and men and women, a hugely talented, highly motivated team of people. And I reflect in my day job here in my business. If I had people of that quality, I think I'd be doing, I'd be absolutely delighted. How are you hiring people or bringing people of that caliber into the service and importantly holding on to them? And Simon Black has just reflected that, are our future leaders in the Navy learning to be more enterprise ready and agile thinkers throughout their careers? So you take this talent, you really nurture it. And how does the command and control structure and the culture of the service enable and promote that sort of progressive thinking? Yeah.
Well, there's an awful lot in that question. And, I fully support the thrust of Simon's question. I mean, first of all, about how we're reaching out to our communities. We've got a fantastic community outreach program. That is to recruit from parts of society that traditionally we haven't been very effective in recruiting from. But that is to make us more diverse and therefore better in an operational sense and more agile. But that agility and that ability to sort of think in an agile way does require a mentality shift. And we do need to sort of break down some of the barriers which I think are real or perceived. And that means having a proper just culture, a proper open culture, a culture where people can give and receive challenge in the right way. And that's one of the things that the Chilcot report determined, that we need to create that culture. And it's a bit patchy across our service, but I, for one, absolutely recognise the need to do that, because that'll just simply make us more effective, both on operations and ashore, in the way we define where we need to go as an organisation. I think there's also some training to be done as well, and I think that starts from the day that someone walks through the gates of Raleigh, Lympstone or Dartmouth, to enable people to think in that non-linear and adaptive way. And I think that's, one of the legacies that we can leave the service when the time comes.
Now, very often when I'm sitting in a TV studio like this with business leaders or politicians, I ask them, when it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be? Admiral, I don't know how long you get to be Fleet Commander, but let's fast forward to that moment. You hand over the baton. What's your legacy?
So I really want to be able to look in the rearview mirror and be confident that we are definitely the foremost naval power in Europe, and we've maintained that position. We've maintained our operational advantage where we have advantage, and I think that's in the underwater battle space in particular. But I think above all, it's having a reputation of recognising the quality of our people and investing in them so they wish to remain in what is, the best Navy in the world.
And are you enjoying it?
I said at the start I'm enjoying it, Stephen. I mean, with the sort of operational outlook that I've described, the opportunity to engage with our people across the fighting arms, it is a huge privilege, one which invigorates me, inspires me whenever I do it. And as Fleet Commander, I have every opportunity to do that. I'm definitely enjoying it.
Well, I can feel out there that there is a huge amount of goodwill, and everybody wishes you every success in the role. I think, sadly, just with an eye on the clock, we're going to need to draw stumps on this. Huge thank you for all of the questions. I mean, we did cover a huge amount of ground. My thanks to the technical team here in the studio, especially the RNRMC, for setting up this View from the Bridge series. I'm going to plot with the Fleet Commander afterwards who we invite on next, but we've set a very high bar for these. So we'll endeavour to be back probably in a month or two with another of these. I think we're going to hope to do 4 or 5 in a given year. But I just want to end by thanking the Fleet Commander for his time in a very, and time is very, very precious for you at the moment. So appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. All the best.